Welcome back to the Group Practice Accelerator podcast, brought to you by Polaris Healthcare Partners, where we leverage decades of healthcare and business experience to drive growth and successful group practices just like yours. If you're a healthcare entrepreneur and you're interested in building, scaling, or exiting your group practice, you found not only the industry's leading resource for business education, but a team of trusted advisors dedicated to helping you achieve and exceed your goals. In short, the team at Polaris creates clarity, confidence, and results. I'm your host, Jamie Falasz, and the Group Practice Accelerator podcast is on the air. Well, hey, everyone. Thanks for tuning in today because I've got a special / returning guest joining me behind the mic, and we're going to be talking about looking inside ourselves. Kidding. Kidding. This is certainly no therapy session, at least not on this show, but we are going to be talking about what we can do within our four walls, or within the walls of our groups, more specifically, to optimize or create value. And since optimization is a word we use a lot on this podcast, especially when my colleague Aiden Bradley is here with me, today's guest is going to help me drill a little further into this topic based on his work in this space. And our plan is to give you 10 ways you can improve or optimize value within your four walls or your group. Said differently, we'll look at some opportunities for cleaning some things up and even same-store growth. Now, that does not mean we've got a list of quick fixes or a bunch of things you can DIY, or that you shouldn't call in the experts for support. You know we advocate for that. But we want to give you some takeaways to think about. So stay tuned, because often the elements we're going to talk about kind of get brushed off in our day-to-day practice. We're all busy, and sometimes we even completely overlook them until suddenly we're seeing a dip in our cash flow, which no bueno. With that, I'd like to reintroduce Cary Smith, co-founder and CEO of DoneDesk, who has firsthand experience with day-to-day workings of group practices. And he'll surely double down on what our own team at Polaris sees going on out there in the wild. Cary, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me. You are the best. That's the best intro I've ever heard. That's really good. You did good.
Well, thank you. I like to set up our guests. We're so fortunate to have you, and we're really grateful for your expertise. And I'm going to throw a bunch of things at you today because I want your opinion on this list of 10 that we're going to go through. I have some ideas of my own, but I want yours, of course. And we want to give some takeaways so that people can implement some things on their own, but they also need to be thinking about engaging the experts, raising our hands here. You offer some very expert services of what you do at DoneDesk that is really unrivaled in our industry, in my opinion. And I know that you see a lot, so you're going to have some things to say once I get into this.
Yeah. So thanks for not sharing the list with me ahead of time. So
you're welcome.
So, okay, I'm ready to go. This is
okay.
Good.
So I'm going to set this up by saying we got to look for opportunities within our practices. I think we all know that once we step back, we look at our P&Ls, we just look around us one day, we miss things over time. I think that's natural. No one runs like a well-oiled machine every single day of every single year. It happens. But there's a way to right that ship. There's also not going to be a quick fix or a $0 endeavor, as I'll put it, for every aspect of this. We can probably agree on that. And sometimes it's addition by subtraction. So maybe we're increasing cash flow by fine-tuning where we might be spending too much. Maybe looking at our vendor partners, paring it down, for example. So number one, getting more patients in the door. Let's talk about that first. That's certainly a way that we can optimize. I know where my mind goes with that. It goes to marketing. Where does your mind go when you're looking at getting more patients in the door, Cary?
Having a bigger door.
Fair point. I totally teed that up for you.
So, yeah. So marketing, it's just the age-old adage of, do you have the capacity to handle the patient flow, right? Then do you line up your product and your program around what patients need or want from you? And it could be the clinical services that you offer, could be the hours that you run, could be the insurance programs that you take. Do you have a membership program that for people that don't have insurance, creating an opportunity that if they come to you, do you have the ability to capitalize on that momentary piece of attention to bring them in? And one of those things that I've seen that is the majority of patients, when they move to a new area and they don't know anyone or don't have a social network and they're looking for a new doctor or new doctors, is that they'll hit social media and they'll find someone local to them. And then they'll look at the Yelp reviews, Google reviews, Facebook, and all that to see if there is someone that has lots of reviews and is well regarded from a review standpoint. And so when you talk about marketing, that's the first expectation that's set is like, hey, the people in this community seem to enjoy this person. They have, the risk is managed of selecting someone I don't know because all these other people have said this person's validated. And then the struggle then becomes when you do get that call, are you executing properly when the phone rings, the new patient appointment, the first exam, the first hygiene, the first evaluate? Like, does all of that flow as smooth as possible for that person? Because they've already seen 500 or 600 people have said this is a 5-star practice. And if they come in and it's not 5-star based on their expectations, at that point, you've closed the door to that opportunity. When I see marketing, I hear business process. I don't hear SEO and website. I hear, do we meet expectations of the people that are coming in so the promise that we've set is realized?
And I think you went in a little bit different direction that immediately came to mind because I'm thinking, what does your marketing look like? Are you spending too much or is it just ineffective? Again, jumping over to your SEO, Google reviews, certainly an important aspect because we're really a review-based society, aren't we? We check reviews on everything before we buy it. So, excellent point. One other thing I want to mention is getting more patients in the door. Boy, if you're looking to establish a de novo, you better be looking at data around the population of your area. What does that ratio look like from dental offices to the population of that area where you're opening a location? That's a critical piece. You better know that if you're opening a new practice there. But again, is your marketing effective? Are you getting patients in the door? What do your reviews look like? Just some things to keep in mind that can really fine tune and make sure that you have a good marketer on staff.
Just to throw it on top of that, I mean, my background's risk management, right? So I'm always like I go down to the error. Where do errors come from?
Right.
And do things work as intended and all of that? So, I'm just as you're talking, I ran across a group in Arizona and I toured one of the facilities virtually with the doctor owner, and it was a gorgeous facility. I mean, beautiful, like brand new, just awesome facility. 2 Yelp reviews, right? Like no, they're not driving any sort of feedback from the patients that are already committed relationship wise to the practice. So that's not something you can buy. That's something you have to generate as part of your workflows.
Yes.
And as they come in, your front has to drive that feedback loop. So you get those reviews, which then compounds to feed. I mean, this isn't, we're not talking about anything anyone doesn't know, but it just comes down to, do you have the disciplines and the process documented so the people know what to do, and are they trained properly so they do it correctly every time, which drives the result you want to get? And so you have a beautiful practice, it's multi-million dollar facility, and you have 2 reviews. That's a risk for a new person. There's a guy down the street that has 500 reviews. Where do you think that person's going to go?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's a no brainer. And it just, you have to not be afraid to ask for reviews. One of the biggest misses that I think I've seen in sales in general, and this certainly applies to selling the reputation of your practice as well, is asking for a referral. So we can translate this into asking for a review. Hey, can you scan this if you're happy with this service, and obviously you can tell by the look on their face if they are or not when they're leaving your practice, can you scan this QR and leave us a review? We'd really appreciate it.
Yep.
It helps our business.
Yeah, well, you're talking about growing within the walls that you have, right? You already have patients, presumably, if you're not a startup, but you already have patients to just say, all these people know at least one person.
Exactly. Oh,
So let's just double our business by asking for referrals, right? Stuff like that.
yeah. And in my list of 10 was, what does your scheduling look like? Is it efficient? But this almost falls under that same heading ish.
Yeah, and I think when we first started talking about this podcast, so this grow from within approach, it's always very employee centric in terms of how they're trained. Do they have the right values of the business in heart when they're doing the things they need to do? Do they do it consistently through time? And then do their attitudes and behaviors drive the right interactions with not only the work they do, but also with the people they interact with as peers and employees, other employees, and also with your patients. And so whatever 10 things or 9 things now you're going to drive back to me as far as like how do we grow from within? And DeWalker talks about this and I've seen it in posts he's done. It's like people, process, and patient flow. I was going to say profits. Those things always all connect back. So then you say, well, okay, if you asked me how do we grow not only dentistry but any business, it's an intense focus on values, attitudes, behaviors of the people that you have. And if they don't have what you need, then you go and augment the people first.
Exactly. Exactly. And I'm so glad you said that because that was the third one.
What's the third question? Ask it.
I was thinking of investing in team training and culture. So, meaning like regular meetings and giving people feedback and being open to receiving feedback too. Do people on your team feel safe to have an open dialogue, an open, respectful dialogue? This is not a complain session. It's got to be, if you're coming with a problem, make sure you've got a solution kind of conversation. Accountability, performance. Maybe there are incentives in place. These are all things to think about within your team that create a culture and makes it more inclusive for your team members to feel like they are part of something greater.
Yeah. Well, sorry, I hate to be an absolutionist, but I don't like the word culture and I don't like the word harmony. I hate those words very much when it comes to building teams and building organizations around goals. So if your business, and I also don't like the word compliance very much because it often is tied to this thing, OSHA and HIPAA, right? So for me, compliance is this business wants to go over there. And if we are not doing everything we need to do as individuals, as in a team to go over there, then we are out of compliance, right?
Okay.
And so the people in their role in whatever they're doing in your business, they need to own that, be confident enough to own that role and be emotionally committed to it from a quality perspective to generate their piece of the workflow effectively. So the product ends up being produced in a way that you intended it to be produced. And I'm thinking of this time there was 20 or 30 dental assistants in this room. I was training a 7 location group here in San Antonio. And I asked them, they were all young people. And I said, what's a spore? A lot of these assistants, they got to do weekly spore tests and they're doing these spore tests. And I go, what's a spore? And not a single person stood up and said anything. Like they wouldn't even answer. So half of them, I didn't know if they didn't know the answer or I didn't know if they were afraid to speak up. Right. And
Okay.
in both cases, it's a failure of leadership, in my opinion. You should have people that are highly engaged and informed on like core work processes like spore testing, which supports your infection control process, which
It's a
supports
fair
your
request.
reputation.
Yeah.
But it's also like, how come young people in that scenario didn't have the confidence in themselves to stand up and say what they needed to say at that moment in time? Right. So, it's like, okay, well, if you can't stand up in front of your peers and in front of this random dude asking a random question, how can you stand up in front of all the patients that you see? Or how can you stand up in front of pressure that you
Mm.
face in the schedule or financial pressure and all that? It's leadership needs to really work their people into that level of confidence first. That's where the culture comes from. Culture isn't a design, it's an output, it's an outcome, right?
Agree.
And
100%.
so, when we talk about growing from within, I think if you're a leader and you have your multi-location setup, you should tomorrow go pick out the top RDA at every one of your locations and say, we are now you've been identified as top talent for our business. You match our values, you match our attitudes, behaviors, your performance, not tenure. I'm not talking about how long you've been here.
No, that doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. And then say, we are now going to capitalize on your engagement with your role as a strategy to start developing disciplines. So our Yelp reviews are 5-star. That's an outcome, right? Like everything
Mhm.
we do. So that would be a strategy. And now I probably blew up your 10, but I just wanted to go in that space because oftentimes on podcasts and in lectures and out on the road, in these DSO meetings, someone will stand up and talk about culture. And I'm like, that's more than just giving tacos on Tuesday for
Right.
lunch.
It's more than a mission statement or a vision for your business. And I don't hate the word culture, but I do 100%, I'm talking you into this, Cary. I do 100% think that it is an output. I very much agree with you. You
Yeah.
can't just say, here's our culture. You have to help build it and you have to make it safe and acceptable for people to speak up. Because I think often in young people where they don't, maybe haven't developed that confidence to have a voice yet,
Hmm.
making it an okay place to do that is a critical first step. Your
Yeah.
business isn't going to grow if everybody's just taking instruction from you constantly.
Yeah. Well, you can't do it as a leader. You can't, there's 47 workflows in one practice, right? If you own 10 practices, you're never going to be able to oversee all those workflows. So the people that you employ have to have some sort of engagement in the work they do. So they're going to, be stewards of the quality and really look after the patient and themselves and their peers and the reputation of the business.
That's very true.
I mean, culture's fair. Culture's fair, but you talked me into it. But I would say that most companies mislabel or misdefine rather what culture actually is or
Oh
should
yeah.
be.
You can't just write it out and go, here's our mission, here's our vision, here's our culture. Because those three things can be very different.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I wanted to touch on one thing that I mentioned before about scheduling, reducing no-shows, making sure we're scheduling efficiently. And just to add a little side note here, and maybe you have some words on this too, there are plenty of systems out there for online booking, text reminders. I mean, go to great lengths to speak to your patients. Make sure that your hygiene recall is taken care of way in advance. People are more likely to schedule it while they're standing in front of you than you having to remind them to come back in 6 months. What's your experience with systems like that?
Well, it's mostly as a patient. When you talk about this relationship you want to have with the customer, right? The people you're providing care for. The last couple of times I've been into practices as I've seen the conversation be a transaction. So there's a guy here in San Antonio, Chris Perry, like he'll do a 1 hour new patient sit down, for an hour. He sits with a new
Yeah.
patient. And part of that conversation is, all right, bro, when I schedule you on the calendar, it's a contract for you to be here, right? And they're like, "Oh, okay, I get it." Because we care about you enough that we're booking this time. It sounds a little, huggy, touchy-feely, right? But the reality is if the patient doesn't understand the value you're trying to bring to them, they're not gonna, you become a transaction. You're a salon visit, right?
Mhm.
And which can be rescheduled to the detriment of the business. And the other kind of flip side of that, it's a little marketing thing, but if somebody shows up on time, then you should reward them for being on time somehow. That's really my take. I mean, yeah, there are a lot of systems and the texting reminders and all that. It has to be aggressive because people's behaviors, you don't want other people's behaviors to drive your business results externally, right?
Yeah, very true. And my next item kind of ties it into that a little bit. And it also relates directly to what you were talking about when we were talking about getting more patients in the door. And that is thinking about your patient experience. So it's not just what do they read online? What are the reviews? From the minute they park in your parking lot and walk into your door, what is that experience like? Is your waiting room welcoming? Is there someone there to welcome them? Do they have a pleasant look on their face? Is everyone treating that patient like that time is a priority?
Mm, yeah.
That's important because I know as a consumer myself, if I walk in somewhere and someone's too busy to say hello to me, ugh, I don't know if I'm going back.
Yeah, it's rough. It's rough, right? I mean, because I'm kind of friendly, this, but it's like when you call a practice, you're trying to reach a doctor and you call their practice and the front desk, you could tell they're busy, right? The front
Sure.
desk person goes, dental practice, how can I help you?
Mm.
Or dental practice, can you please hold? And it's just, you could hear this rushed hurry in their voice. Or you get the other end of the spectrum, which is, thank you for calling the practice. How can I? Literally, I've heard that spectrum. You
Makes me
imagine
so excited to go to that office.
you're a new patient into the area and you just call them up and you're just like blowing it again, you're blowing that opportunity for the lack of attention that someone's playing in that. But I do think about Larry Doherty, my dentist, quite a bit. when I go to see his practice, because literally when I walk in, everyone at the front desk says, "Hey, Cary, how's it going?" Everyone that is real friendly, and that's just in
Yeah.
their nature.
It's like
Uh,
cheers when you walk in there. And that's how I
yeah,
feel. Address you
yeah,
by your first name. Even if you haven't met them, they should know who's walking in their door.
yeah, yeah.
It's
I
really simple. It just takes, a couple of minutes of prior planning, couple of seconds, really, not even a couple of minutes.
Yeah, but it's basically what we're talking about is a training protocol where people know what to do and they're being
Exactly.
held accountable for that. It's nothing more than that. I mean, I don't want to overcomplicate it. It's just people just need to be aware that even though you're at the front, you're still part of this treatment continuum. There's expectations people are walking in the front door with, and one of those expectations probably is going to be anxiety in some cases.
Oh, for
So,
sure.
there's just having everyone be aware of those impacts. I mean, this is what we're talking about is business 101, right? I mean, just, the customers are coming to you, you got to capitalize on give them what they expect in that situation.
Sure. And we've talked about some things with employee retention and open communication, but
Mm,
oftentimes I think practices overlook patient retention. And when they're coming in with anxiety and you're meeting them with a less than enthusiastic hello or nothing at all, that's not a good recipe. It's just
yeah.
it's just not. And it can go somewhere else. They've got plenty of other options. You're not the only game in town. You have to step up your smile a little bit and just be friendly. It's not that hard. Day's a lot better when you're friendly.
One thing that's missed in this world is this concept of thank you. You know where the origin of the word thank you came from?
No, but now I need to know.
Okay, so thank you is short for I'm thinking of what you did for me. That's what thank
Oh,
you means.
I like that.
And you say thank you in that scenario to a patient, like, "Hey, thanks for being here on time."
Mhm.
I've never been thanked for being on time because
Oh, I think that's a great idea.
I'm always early, but
Yeah.
having the doctor just say, "Thank you for being here on time," those 5 or 6 words, whatever it is, as part of the talk track of coming to the practice, I think would make a big difference in future missed appointments. So, it's just things having an awareness, as you go
Yeah.
through the day,
Well,
would
and
be
that's I'll step out of my current role and put myself back as a hygienist when I was. I appreciated patients like that because I had somebody who showed up 5 to 10 minutes late for his appointment on a regular basis, and it made me insane. It was every time. And then my whole day was running behind and I'm frantic because then the trickle down effect of that is your next patient is going to be annoyed because then they're waiting because someone was not on time and things happen. They do.
Yeah,
Just call if something happens. We'll figure it out. But
yeah.
when you have a repeat offender, anyway, enough of my rant. So on to the next. So the next two kind of track together. Do you love your practice management system? Do you use it to its full capacity? And there's a track I want to go down. One, we're looking at our KPIs
Mhm.
and tracking them through a practice management system. I know so many people that do not pull reports or look at them or use them. Part one, love your practice management system. Not every aspect is going to work perfect for everybody, but as long as you can pull reports and look at your KPIs, you can use that to grow your practice and your group from within and do that fine tuning that we're talking about. Oh, let's
Yeah,
start with because we're going to first practice management systems. Obviously, if you're not using it to its full potential, you need to.
yep.
It's step one. Step two, KPIs. What does your case acceptance look like? And there are a few of my 10 that are going to fall under this category.
Mhm.
Case acceptance, new patient flow, hygiene reappointment. Big one here, production per provider,
Mm.
and chair utilization rates. Do you know those things? What's your overhead? What's your collections? What's your supply spend? These are all places we can fine tune and take a look at, are we optimized well across the group?
Yeah, so the struggle you're gonna run into, there's the drivers of KPIs, right? And in your software. The first thing is the softwares are not simple to use. There's a lot of places to put information, there's a lot of clicks, there's a lot of other technologies that are stuck into these practice management softwares that do other things. I saw Invisalign's software and it has like all these buttons all over the place, right? And
Mhm.
so from a user perspective who's putting that information in, the hourly waged employee who doesn't really care about statistics or P&Ls and all that. I mean, it's just too many places to put information. And information's also coming from different sources that sometimes are easy to implement or integrate, and sometimes they're not. And
Sure.
it's very, very fractured world as far as like systems we have to use. The focus on KPIs is apropos, right? I mean, you need to know the health of your organization. The issue is that KPIs, from my perspective, coming at it from the human side, it's like, so what? You look at these dashboard companies that have all the that can plug into your practice management software and show you all these charts and graphs and data. And for
Mhm.
me, it's like, so what? Is the data accurate to begin with? Probably not. But then I'm also saying, well, if you wanted to change something about the numbers to grow your practice, guess what that means? That means a training cycle has to happen to influence the behaviors of the people doing the work that influence that number.
Yes. Now we're
And
back to our conversation on employing the experts. But
yes,
even before that, you need to lean on your rep on how to use these systems and where to gather this information, how to pull these reports. They should be guiding you on that. And once you get to that point where you have a report saying, hey, your supply spend is, 7, 8%, we don't want it there. Then let's talk to somebody about how we can get that down. What are the best ways to do that? Can we look at your vendors? Where are we spending what? And is it in an SOP? I'll put it simply
yeah.
that this is how we do this and this is how we do this across the group.
Yeah. My first question would be, is the data accurate? I mean, if it's actionable, right, it should be accurate enough to be actionable, right? I also think about defensibility. Like, are we putting the information in around the patient chart to be defensible if we ever have a question down the road? The answer is almost always the data is not accurately captured. And that bears out in malpractice and in state board actions. Almost every state board action includes failure to properly document, which tells me that if they're not accurately putting in patient information, there's got to be some variance on all the other data.
Oh,
But
yeah.
but
Okay.
but
Maybe
all
that's
that
a
be
whole other episode.
but we're talking about growing from within your walls. I think the
Yes.
first thing is can we trust the source of data? Is the data a real truth for us? And then you stack rank with your help, right? What's most important to address first? What lever do we pull first for maximum impact? And then, but if your data is not accurate, you're never going to have a position to stand in. You're just chasing ghosts a little bit with how are we going to improve this thing? Which ultimately comes down to sometimes people saying, well, I can't trust my data, but we need new patients. Let me spend 10K on SEO. And I was like, that's the most worst decision you could make, right?
Exactly.
But that's how that stuff occurs, is because there's no version of the truth that someone really believes in. So they're just going to go chase a ghost, a growth ghost in some way that's not tied to a KPI that you can actually influence.
That's true. And we do have to look at trends in terms of those reports as well.
Mhm.
What does that look like from month to month, quarter to quarter? And you should be looking at those reports to see where you stand.
Do you know where those reports get really, really accurate?
Tell me.
The week before you try to sell your practice, because you want maximum value for your business. And the way and the purchaser wants to know, is the data accurate to offer you the price that you think you should get? And I'm just like, well, why don't we do that now? Why don't we?
Exactly. And that goes kind of to the heart of just who the heck we are here at Polaris. Let's be accurate about it. Let's take a look at it on a granular level and see where we can maximize the value of every single practice in your group. Because you might some that don't perform as well as the others. So we want to make sure that we can look at those trends and get it as accurate as humanly possible. So we can take a look at all of these elements that can help us grow within the location and by default within the group.
You mentioned bringing in outside expertise, and that's what you guys do, and that's the value you bring to the table because you're unencumbered by actual patients. So some people say, well, I'll promote this individual on my team or bring cousin Jimmy in to work on this project. It's like that you do get attention paid to it, but it's not attention that is based in some sort of reality or experience. It's just reacting again. And then those people, if you do it internally, they tend to get busy on other projects. The data integrity programs end up falling apart ultimately. So,
Very true. All right. So the next way that we can help optimize within our four walls. Kind of goes back to some of that confidence we were talking about before. Case acceptance. How are you presenting cases to patients? And this is something that we focus on in our clinical coaching program. In fact, I've done a couple of podcasts with our clinical coaches, Vivek Solanki and Steve Giannuzzo, and we do cover things like that because I don't think that confidence is really innate in people when they graduate from dental school. It's something you develop over time, and it requires mentorship.
Yeah. So I love case acceptance because basically that's like, do you trust me?
Exactly.
That's all it is. That's all it is. Well,
Right.
it's actually two things. One, do you trust me? And two, do you understand me? Right. Those two things. And that's all it is. And people like to overcomplicate it. But I think when people start talking about case acceptance, they always start with the number in mind and not the patient person in mind.
Right.
And the guy that taught me this, Pat Vuong over in Cypress, Texas at Smile Avenue, I went and visited his office. He was just getting open, super cool dude, now owns the whole shopping center. But he had 40-inch HD TVs in every operatory connected to an intraoral camera. And instead of saying, this is what we found, and having the patient in the chair try to synthesize and understand what was being said, he just showed them,
Mhm.
this is what we see. This is what this means. And then he shows them options for treatment, which is A, do nothing, B, do something or do a piece of something. Right. And so obviously then the patient's going to go to the next problem in their decision making equation when it comes to dentistry is how much does this cost? Right.
Right.
And so then they're like, well, if the cost is tied with their level of comfort and trust, then they're just going to say, okay, let's do it. If the cost is tied to discomfort with what is being said or a misunderstanding is what is being said, then it comes down to, well, can you just do whitening over perio? I can afford the whitening. I can't afford the rest of it. Yeah.
We've talked about this on this podcast before with our clinical coaches that I think oftentimes when we don't possess the confidence to speak to our patients about what is truly good for them, would you recommend this service to someone in the same situation if it was your mother, sister, brother, best friend, whoever, and taking money out of the equation? Like you said, we have to present a case based on findings and not what we think the patient can afford. So,
Yeah,
take-
it's never because what'll happen is, Jamie, is if you base it on what they can afford, right? It becomes a financial transaction.
yeah, and it's
And
okay to offer patient financing within your practice. I had that as a little
to,
subheading in my mind.
totally fine, totally fine. But so 80% of all malpractice cases against doctors, this comes directly from the malpractice insurance companies, 80% yield no payment to the patient, right? And this is over 5,000 malpractice cases for this data set. And so there I'm like, well, why did we have 80% of 5,000 cases yield no payment to the patient? It's because good dentistry was done, but the patient got something they didn't expect, right? And almost always the case involved money.
Mhm.
So if you push it to a financial transaction and things don't work out, then we're in a money argument. We're not in a health argument, we're in a money argument. That starts at the beginning of this conversation. So case acceptance isn't presenting what we can do for you. It's gaining the trust and coming down to the patient's dental intelligence, the patient's IQ around dentistry. And maybe it's a different language. Maybe they can't hear you. Maybe there's a disability, right? I mean, there's all kinds of, or maybe they're just too drunk to understand. They came in after the after the happy hour. And now,
Can't say I haven't seen it before, but
well,
I'm
that's
gonna take it
yeah.
back to that big TV that you were talking about. Having your intraoral camera blown up in front of somebody's face like that, if they can't see it,
It's
they're
not
not going
real.
to accept it. It just
Not
doesn't seem
real.
like it, and it's just not important. It doesn't seem
Yeah.
if you haven't made it important to them, why should they think it's important to their health? And
Yeah.
you do have to relate it to health. So, okay,
Do you know what makes it important ultimately?
what's that?
The good news is you have something on your side that ultimately will rectify the entire situation. Guess what that is?
I don't want to guess. Just tell me.
Pain.
Oh, yeah, there's that. Yeah.
It's like, hey, don't trust me, go do your thing.
Yeah.
And then guess what? You'll degrade into pain, and that's always more expensive at the end. But
Yeah, it sure is. Yeah, it sure is. So, my next, and this ties in with case acceptance as well, standardizing clinical protocols. Another thing that we talk about on this podcast with our clinical coaches, and it really does lend itself to optimizing within one location or 100 locations. If you are all over the place with how you perform a procedure, it's going to cost you. Dr. Solanke and I just had this conversation not long ago on a podcast, and I know he's a big advocate of this, and it's shown in the success of his group. Every single procedure that you do and that anyone does in your practice needs to have an SOP. Here's how we do this. We don't go off the rails, provide it in the way that we think is best. That has to be a decision. And not that those things can't be changed. Clinical protocols change over time and you have to be open to changing them. But when they do change, they have to be changed across the board. It
yeah,
costs money from supply spend. It costs money for chair utilization, that time that the patient spends in the chair. So it trickles down to a lot of different avenues. And that's loosely tied to case acceptance, but it is things change over time and we have to kind of flow with it, but there has to be a protocol in place.
I mean, you can't influence a result if you don't know how to do the dang thing, right?
That's true.
And you can't measure quality if you don't know how to do the thing.
Right.
And, and we talk about, when you and I were queuing up this chat here, we were talking about, how do we grow within our four walls? And some groups, DSOs, will say, well, oh, let's just offer more specialty services within our group.
Mhm.
And then you go, okay, well, scope of practice, is there a scope of practice issues we're going to run into because doing IV sedation or doing endodontics or doing any sort of oral surgery, you're increasing the invasiveness of the procedure. So you're also increasing the time it takes to do that procedure. You're also it's a different kind of facility. It's a different kind of emergency preparedness, different kind of employee training. It's like, do we really want to go into specialty business if we're a general dentistry practice? Does it make sense? Do we have the right scheduling? Do we have the right blocks? Do we have the right people? Do we have the right,
Yes.
and some people come at it and say, well, yeah, we need to do ortho or clear aligners in our general practice. And I get it. It's just, are we going to run into scope of practice issues, which will slow us down at the end of the day?
Yeah.
And that's a leadership decision of the business itself. It's actually just a business decision on how you're going to operate. Anyway, just talking about when you talk about protocols, it's like stay in your lane, and if you get out of your lane, refer the thing out. So, and that's coming from me. My brother's an oral surgeon, and he tells me all the time of cases that come into his practice where it originated at the dental practice. The doc needed rescue and sent him over to my brother's oral surgery program to get the patient taken care of. It's like, well, you could have sent him to begin with. Our algorithm up front is, are we going to do this? And if we are, how do we do it?
Exactly. And having those protocols in place so everyone practices the same way. It also creates a confidence for the rest of the team. They know what to expect. So now we're back to that team training, bad word culture that you don't like, but now I think you might like it. We're back to that aspect. And that said, you took my number 10. It was expanding services. So
Ah,
thank
okay.
you. You already wrapped it up in a nice, nice little package for us.
Yeah, I think, we talk about these things, right? But it's like, of all the opportunities to change the way or improve or optimize our business, like what's most important and what's going to be the easiest, what's going to be the most effective? And oftentimes, as a business owner myself, like SOC 2 compliance that came into my life. And I'm just like, I don't want to do SOC 2 compliance. I don't know anything about it, don't know how to do it. And I found someone that consults on SOC 2 compliance and knows all the rules already. And
Yeah.
that's why the doctors come to me for compliance stuff and for DoneDesk and all that. Why they go to
Yes.
you for the practice management and the fractional practice lead and clinical and all the stuff. Is that sometimes you do need help just to start momentum happening.
You absolutely do. And that leads me to, because you know there's going to be more than 10, I want to know what you see. What would be your top couple that we haven't covered yet? And look at that from a lens of DoneDesk. You're walking into a small group, let's call it 7 locations.
Mhm.
What are the top things that you run across from a compliance? I know we said that that's another bad word, but what do you see that can be a short-term fix and one that just requires a lot more input from the team and perhaps training?
Right now, we've got something like 20,000 customers right now. And I was in 50 offices in May, touring the offices for this group that we work with, two groups that are proximate to each other. And the universal truth is this: these young people that you employ that are hourly wage employees usually come to you without leaders in their lives, usually the right kinds of leaders. And talent is obviously in a service business, talent drives everything. That's why we built it. That's why we built everything we built, is that there's just this gap in knowledge that's flowing into the patient experience inadvertently. And you talk about all the state board rules, OSHA, HIPAA, infection control, emergency preparedness, radiation standards, facility readiness. Then you talk about clinical risk management. It's just a bunch of, or my viewpoint, it's like there's so much to know that not everybody knows it. And so things just kind of happen, but there's some serious gaps that are systemic in these DSOs. I mean, I talked to a group the other day, they have 160 locations. And the first thing I see in Reddit is this giant chain of one star. These people rip me off. Oh, yeah, I agree. Like just this constant
No.
thread mentioning this one group specifically. They ripped me off, they're da da da, and all this. And I see this and I just say the solution is actually very elementary. It's not cheap. It's not cheap at all, but it is the survival strategy. And that is, this is the easiest said thing. And I fixed this. I fixed this in Fortune 500 companies previously, but you have to calibrate on what is talent first. Values, attitudes, behaviors, not skills and experiences. We hire for skills and experiences. We fire for attitudes and behaviors. That's what you're doing right now.
Accurate.
So values, attitudes, and behaviors, and just quantify and clearly state in simplest terms possible, this is who is talent for us, right? And then you mentioned the word lens. This is the only thing I'd ever do with a DSO is take the lens and look at every single person and rank them out. Do they meet values? Do they meet attitude? Do they meet behaviors? Not just on a Tuesday or Thursday, July, whatever it is, but every single day over 90 days. Do they meet these things? Can we trust that they're going to exhibit these behaviors through time? And then if they do, you ascend them, those people, into leadership training opportunities to let them have stewardship over themselves as a future leader, but also have stewardship over all these workflows that the practice owner or practice leaders don't see every day. And if you just did that over the next 6 months or year, I guaranteed your business production wise will, I don't know what the number is, but I do know that a 1% increase in effectiveness yields a 2% increase in production. The impacts are huge. All the things you're talking about, patient retention, systems utilizations, cleanliness of our practice. Do we say hi to people? Do we meet up with the patient experience and get the 5-star? All of that comes from sitting with the people and building them into this model that you know works for you across your business. But practices don't do that. So what do they end up with? The payment then is for not doing that. The payment is missed opportunity, some risk, right? Variance across the board. But the worst payment that practice owners face for that lack of that discipline is that when you go home, you think about work. That's the worst payment of all, because
That's fair.
when you put your shoes away in the closet, you don't worry if the shoelaces are tied or not. It's something you don't need to worry about, but you do worry, wow, I have 6 open hygiene positions and my production's 40% off this week. You know, you take that home with you, and that's the payment. So you're like, well, how can I readjust my production in my facility? Well, you, as a practice owner, you're going to say, there's a lot to do. But I would say start with sitting with your leadership team and saying values, attitudes, behaviors. What are we seeing work here? What do we need more of? And then build your business around that first. The rest of it will follow in perfectly. Get help because there's too much to do. Pull experts in, spend the money because you're losing money right now if you don't do it.
Exactly.
Spend the money on consultants and help get more organized because the opportunity is massive.
I really think that you just summed up the 10, 12, 13 items on our list in a very nice little package with a bow on it there. Truly. And it does take paying attention to the behaviors, the actions, the attitudes of everyone on your team. And if you can do that on that micro level and have your leaders look at that on a micro level, the growth potential, not just from that practice, but from the group itself, when you have that cohesive attitude and something that can be reproduced with someone who feels good about their job, that type of growth potential with everything from patient retention to case acceptance then gets amplified. Like
Yeah.
I cannot stress enough having the right team players in place.
Well, frictionless leadership and going home with everything done is my goal. I want my owners to have that. The rest of it's easy if you can get that stuff done.
Yeah. People, processes, patient flow.
There you go.
There it is. There it is. Well, Cary, it was so nice to have you back with me today. Always appreciate the conversation and your insights. And we could probably talk for hours. And I know there are a couple other episodes that'll probably come from this. But in terms of getting in touch with you, how can our listeners reach out? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
I'm Deion Sanders, not hard to find. DoneDesk.com, Cary at DoneDesk.com, email, and just catch me on LinkedIn or, really just go through the boss, go through Jamie, and that's
you. Now, we'll put your contact in the show notes as always, but again, you can reach out to me. I'll connect you with Cary. I'm happy to do that. And as always, if you want to learn about any of Polaris services, or maybe there's a topic that we haven't covered that you want to hear about, you can send us an email to info@polarishealthcarepartners.com, or you can take a look at our website at polarishealthcarepartners.com. Thanks so much for being a loyal listener and subscriber. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend or colleague. And leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you on the next episode of the Group Practice Accelerator podcast.